We good? We live? Okay. So take 490 off of this list of withdrawals. So excluding that, the other bills 444, 492, 636, 820, Senate Joint Resolution 3, we could maybe just take as a consent calendar if that's okay.
Favorable.
Okay. All in favor of accepting all these withdrawals, these 5 bills, raise your hand. Okay, no. So those bills are all withdrawn. Yes,
Efficient we
we are very efficient. Now let's move to voting list number 11. Stacy, why don't you lead us off with Senator Carter's bill? We'll just go down the list.
Okay, Senate Bill 31, Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners, student members and task force to study compensation and student members. This bill expands the voting rights of the student member of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. The bill also alters the selection process for the student member by requiring that student member be elected by the middle and high school students of Baltimore City Public Schools in accordance with the procedures established by the board in collaboration with the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. Finally, the bill establishes a task force to study student board member compensation and additional student membership. The bill takes effect July 1, 2023, and the provisions relating to the task force terminating on June 30th, 2024. There is one amendment in your packet on page 3, and this was approved by the Baltimore City Senate delegation. The amendment strikes middle school students from voting for the student member of the Board of School Commissioners.
Yeah, it's a local bill amendment favorable. Second from Simon Ayer. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed. Okay, amendment carries. Now we've got the bill as amended.
So I do want to.
Sure.
This is a local bill? Okay, because it says Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners.
Right, it was brought by the Senator Carter through the delegation, the Baltimore City delegation. They did provide a letter.
Okay.
Okay, we've got, is there a motion? Okay, Senator Augustine, Senator Kagan, all in favor of Senate Bill 31 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay. Next up, Senator Kagan, 111.
Senate Bill 111, election law, campaign finance, draft committees, and exploratory committees. This bill establishes draft committees and exploratory committees in state campaign finance law, defining them and making them subject to the same provisions that apply to political committees, subject to certain limitations. There is one amendment from the sponsor, Senator Kagan, and that the reprint of that is begins on page 4 of your packet. This amendment does several things. It alters the definition of campaign finance material to change prospective candidate to potential candidate to conform to the provisions of this bill. It defines the term donation as it relates to draft and exploratory committees. It alters the applicability provision to exempt provisions of the campaign finance title related to non-related administrative requirements and candidate contribution limits. It expands the list of items from which a draft or exploratory committee may take a disbursement or may make a disbursement. It requires purchase of equipment by an authorized candidate campaign committee from a draft or exploratory committee to be at fair market value of the equipment. It provides for the return of funds donated to a draft or exploratory committee after it closes down and what entities those funds may be paid to. And it provides that a donation to a draft or exploratory committee is not subject to any limitations.
You want to add anything?
A wonderful job, and I'm eating lunch, sorry. I'm happy to take any questions, but I would move the amendment.
Okay, there's a motion, a second on the Kagan amendments on Senate Bill 111. All in favor of the amendments? Raise your hand. All opposed, amendments carry. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Okay.
As amended.
Senator, is there a second? Senator Brooks. All in favor of Senate Bill 111 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed. Okay, 111 carries. Next up, Senate Bill 310, April.
Senate Bill 310, Natural Resources Black Bear Conflict Reduction and Damage Reimbursement Fund uses. So Budget and Tax is the primary committee on this bill. We are secondary, which is why it might not sound familiar to everybody. As introduced, this bill renames the Department of Natural Resources existing Black Bear Damage Reimbursement Fund as the Black Bear Conflict Reduction and Damage Reimbursement Fund, and requires the department to access or to accept requests for grants from the fund for projects that reduce conflicts between humans and black bears through non-lethal methods. Bill establishes provisions governing grant eligibility for such projects and caps total grant funding for such projects. Bill also modifies existing provisions governing reimbursements from the fund for damages caused by black bears. Finally, the governor must include in the annual budget bill an appropriation of at least $1 million to the fund. There are amendments being offered by Budget and Tax. Those amendments are on page 9 of your voting packet. The reprint starts on page 10. The Budget and Tax amendments rename the fund to be the Black Bear Damage Mitigation Reimbursement Fund and expands the purpose of grants awarded from the fund to apply to projects that mitigate damages caused by black bears, in addition to projects that reduce conflicts between humans and black bears. The amendments also alter the cap on fund amounts that may be used for grants by specifying that at least 10% of the total annual appropriation to the fund must remain available for damage reimbursements. Amendments strike language on minimum reimbursement amounts, maintaining the current minimum of $200. And they strike mandatory appropriation language in the bill and instead authorize the governor to include an appropriation of at least $50,000 to the fund each year.
Okay, any discussion about any of the B and T amendments?
Question.
Sarah Kagan?
Maybe this is effective, maybe the amendments affect this. I'm looking at the fiscal note. And you just, Ms. Morton just said $50,000 a year, which is a totally modest amount. And so shall is less of an issue than may, but we're looking at expenditures, 1.3 million, a million, 1.2, 1.2.
Right,
am I looking?
and that's because the original bill.
The amendment
was-
totally changed that.
yeah,
That's what I was seeking
yeah,
clarity.
Exactly. The original bill was a mandatory appropriation of $1 million per year.
That's what I was wondering about. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Remember, we're getting away from mandated expenditures
Yeah, that's
generally.
why I was
Yeah.
asking.
Senator Washington.
So I thought we voted on a mandated appropriation this. Did we not? Okay.
Yeah, go on.
I actually did notice that there was a bill on the floor today that had a mandated shall, and it was $150,000 was the explanation. It was a Hershey bill. And it was, so I think there might be a size issue. And so 50,000 might be different than a million.
Could be that 250 threshold
That
you
could
know,
be.
before we send something to B and T, I'm not sure, but Ed, we've got the B and T amendments on the table. Any further questions about the Budget and Taxation Committee amendments? If not, is there a motion on the amendment? Augustine, second, Senator Hester, all in favor of the Budget and Tax amendments, raise your hand. All opposed? We've got the bill on the table as amended. Senate Bill. Okay, Senator Augustine, favorable. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Senator Kagan. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, 310 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed? And by the way, for those of you who might have missed the first or second bill, remember, we're keeping the vote open, so y'all can weigh in with Lemuria on the Senate Bill 31 from Senator Carter and the 111 from Senator Kagan. You can just tell Lemuria how you want to vote. And now we've 338, Senate President Ferguson's bill.
Right.
Stacey.
So this was included in error because we are, BNT was secondary and we had thought there was amendments, but there was not. So they did return it favorable with amendments to us. And so there's no changes.
Okay, so we don't have to do anything?
Nope, we're done.
Okay, we're good. We're going to go to Senator Augustine, 414. April?
Senate Bill 414, Commission to Advance and Strengthen Firefighting within Maryland. This bill establishes the Commission to Advance and Strengthen Firefighting within Maryland. The commission must study and make recommendations regarding 1, the effectiveness and viability of uniform incentives, offerings, or practices employed in other states to attract, support, and retain individuals in firefighting roles. 2, the suitability of comparable or similar incentives, offerings, and practices as compared to the landscape of the state. And 3, any other global issues the commission may consider useful in enhancing and supporting career and volunteer firefighting in the state. There are amendments in your bill packet. The amendments appear on page 14. The reprint is on page 15. These amendments are being offered by the bill's sponsor, Senator Augustine, and they expand the purpose of the commission to include the advancement and strengthening of emergency medical services in the state in addition to firefighting.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion about the Augustine amendments? Questions? Seeing none. Okay, all in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, amendments carry. We've got the bill as amended on the floor. Any motion? Favorable with the firefighter. Be second. Okay, we've got that. Any discussion on 414 as amended? Any discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor of 414 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, 414 carries. Next up, 434, back to you, April.
Senate Bill 434, Natural Resources Restorative Aquaculture Pilot Program. This bill requires the Department of Natural Resources to establish and implement a restorative aquaculture pilot program to provide financial incentives to a holder of an aquaculture lease to maintain their lease or a part of their lease under specified restorative conditions for at least 4 years. There are no amendments, but I would just note for the sake of transparency that the department had requested that this just be turned into a task force or a study for consideration.
Okay, any discussion? Again, no amendments. Senator Hester.
Actually hadn't seen the department's comments, but I did have a conversation with somebody who knew more about oysters than I. And their question was, does this allow for traditional native oysters?
Sorry, the only type of oysters you're allowed to grow in the state are native, the standard Cristostrea virginicus or whatever, the eastern oyster. It's the only thing you're allowed to grow in Maryland.
Okay, any further discussion about, again, pilot program versus study versus task force issue? Okay, is there a motion? There are no amendments. Any motion on the table? Anyone to move? Senator Brooks, is there a second? Senator Gallion? Okay, any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor, raise your hand of the Senate Bill 434. Okay, that bill carries, looks unanimously. Next up, 524, Senator McKay. Lexus.
Senate Bill 524, Garrett County Board of County Commissioners meetings. This bill changes this local bill changes the frequency of the Garrett County Board of County Commissioners public meetings from weekly meetings to meetings twice a month. The bill authorizes the board to meet in person or via video broadcast. There are amendments by the sponsor, which authorize the meetings to occur either in person or through live stream instead of using that video broadcast term. The sponsor amendments prohibit the meetings from being held over live stream more than twice in a row without an official state of emergency.
Okay, any discussion? Again, it's probably a local bill, but
Right.
anyway, Senator Kagan.
Yes, it is a local bill. I just wondered about precedent with the language. And I mean, I'm fine with it, the concept. I was seeking clarification. State of emergency, can there be a county state of emergency or is it statewide? Is that clear? Because if it's snow in Garrett County versus COVID statewide or something, is that clear or does it cover both?
Official state of emergency declared, so it would apply to statewide or local.
Either one.
Right,
And that would be clear.
right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, there was an amendment offered. Is there a motion? We've got Senator Gallion. Any second on the amendment?
Second.
Senator Augustine, all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, amendment carries. Any motion on the table on the bill as amended? Senator Gallion, Senator Brooks, All in favor, any discussion? Any, okay, seeing none. All in favor of the bill as amended, we're on again 524, raise your hand. All opposed, 524 carries. Next up, Senate Bill 620, back to you, Stacy.
Senate Bill 620, Institutions of Higher Education, Sports Wagering Contracts Prohibition. This bill prohibits an institution of higher education from entering into a contract with a regulated gaming entity or its agent if, under the terms of the contract, the institution of higher education receives a commission, a bonus, or any other incentive payment based on the success of securing student participation in sports wagering or online sports wagering. Allowable contracts between an institution and a regulated gaming entity or its agent are subject to public inspection in accordance with the Maryland Public Information Act. A regulated gaming entity means a mobile sports wagering licensee, an online sports wagering operator, or a sports wagering licensee. An agent of a regulated gaming entity includes a marketing firm or other similar entity contracted to perform gaming-related services for a regulated gaming entity. There is one amendment offered by the sponsor on page 19 of your voting packet. This amendment would prohibit the institution of higher education from entering into a contract with a sports marketing entity that enters into a contract with a regulated gaming entity or its agent if, under the terms of the contract, either the sports marketing entity or the institution of higher education receives a bonus, commission, or any other incentive payment based on the success or securing student participation in sports wagering or online sports wagering. The reason for that amendment is the structuring by the institutions of how they conduct their sports management. So oftentimes the institution itself isn't the one with the contract. It's this third-party marketing vendor that has the contract with the regulated gaming entity. So this would prohibit both the institution or that vendor from having that provision in their contract.
Any questions about the Heddleman amendment?
Unfavorable on the amendment.
Okay, we've got a favorable on the Heddleman amendment. Is there a second? Senator Brooks, any discussion about the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, amendment carries. Is there a motion on the bill as amended? Okay, Senator Brooks, is there a second? Senator Lewis Young, all in favor of the bill, Senate Bill 620 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed. Next up, Senator Mouts, 634, April.
Senate Bill 634, Natural Resources, Oyster Inspection and Severance Taxes Increase. This bill increases the severance tax from $1 per bushel to $2 per bushel that is levied on every bushel of oysters caught within the limits of the natural oyster bars of the state exclusive of the Potomac River. Bill also increases the inspection tax from 30 cents per bushel to $1 per bushel that is levied on marketable oysters shipped in the shell to any place outside the state. Finally, the bill requires that one of every $2 of the severance tax collected be distributed to the county oyster commissions in specified counties for the repletion of natural oyster bars located in the waters of the county. There is an amendment in your bill packet on page 21. The reprint is on page 22. The amendment repeals obsolete language relating to a tax increase that occurred in 1982 and adds Baltimore County to the list of counties where oyster repletion activities may occur.
Okay, any question about the amendment? Is there a motion on the amendment? Sarah Augustine, Sarah Brooke, okay, got the amendment moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all, yeah, Senator Gallion.
Thank you. I was looking at the bill list on our laptop. It has the Maryland Watermen's Association unfavorable, but I reached out to one of the members. They said they did not have opposition. So we actually went back and looked at the video of it and they were favorable. So they must have just turned it in, hit the wrong thing when they were turning their submission, just in case anybody saw that unfavorable under Maryland Watermen's Association. It's not.
Okay, well, maybe let if Senator Carosa comes back later, let her know that before she casts her vote, because now we're, open vote here. Okay, any amendment carried. Any motion on the table? Again, did we already do that? A motion and second on the bill as amended? 634.
We did the motion on the floor.
We did the amendment. Any discussion as amended? Is there a second on that? Okay, there's a second for Senator Kagan. All in favor of 634 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Well, we do have Senator Simon Ayer was negative. Now we've got some sunset extensions. So let's start with Alexis on Senate Bill 713, the architects.
Senate Bill 713, State Board of Architects Sunset Extension. This bill continues the State Board of Architects within the Maryland Department of Labor by 10 years to July 1st, 2023. This bill takes effect June 1st of this year.
Okay, any amendments?
Yeah.
No,
Okay, yes, discussion, Senator Kagan.
For those who have been on this committee before, you've known of my concern about this board and how ineffective it has been in responding to fraud and possibly endangering our constituents. So this morning, literally this morning, I talked to a constituent and I heard from the architects, lobbyists and stuff. So I'm going to ask whether we can hold this for whatever period of time is most appropriate. I'm hoping to figure this out. And just for those who don't know this, so there was a constituent of mine, registered, licensed architect who does great work and does a lot of historic preservation actually and creative work, and who had someone working with him many years ago. And that person ultimately ended up stealing his license and his credentials and misrepresenting it as his, getting jobs to like build someone's deck, without the skills. And so he could build the deck, it could be unsafe, people could be injured or die, and the Board of Architects was just completely unresponsive. And this has been a long time, which is why the kind of automatic renewal thing didn't go through a few years ago and why we are still dealing with this issue. And so
Okay, well.
I do hope and expect that we're going to move forward, but we still
Okay,
are waiting for better
let's hold
response.
this one. If there's any questions on any of these sunsets, we can hold off. Let's go back to Alexis, Senate Bill 714.
All right, so Senate Bill 714, State Board of Certified Interior Designers Sunset Extension. Similarly, this bill extends the termination date for the Board of Certified Interior Designers within the Department of Labor by 10 years to July 1st, 2034. No amendments.
Okay, any discussion of this sunset? Okay, is there a motion or do you have a question, Senator Kagan? Your light's on.
That's old.
Okay, we got a motion, a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of Senate Bill 714, sunset for the interior designers, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Let's go to next page. Sunset extension for the State Board of Foresters, Alexis, Senate Bill 715.
Senate Bill 715, State Board of Foresters Sunset Extension. This bill continues the State Board of Foresters for 10 years. So it'll expire on July 1st, 2035 if passed. No amendments. No amendments.
Okay, any discussion,
Sorry.
questions? Okay, Senator Augustine, is there a second? Senator Brooks, any discussion? All in favor of Senate Bill 715, raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries. Next up, Senate Bill 716, the Landscape Architects.
Senate Bill
Sunset.
Senate Bill 716, State Board of Examiners of Landscape Architects Sunset Extension. This bill extends the termination date of the State Board of Examiners of Landscape Architects by 10 years to July 1st, 2034. No amendments to this bill.
Discussion? Motion? Senator Augustine with favorable, Senator Washington second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of Senate Bill 716, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Next up, Senate Bill 717, Engineers.
Senate Bill 717, State Board of Stationary Engineers Sunset Extension. This bill extends the termination date for the State Board of Stationary Engineers by 10 years to July 1st, 2034. There are no amendments.
Okay, any discussion on this one? Got some engineers here. Anybody? Okay. Okay, we got a motion from Senator Augustine. Is there a second? Senator Hester, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of Senate Bill 717, no amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, that carries. Next bill, Senate Bill 719. This bill, I will say, when it came in, did have a fair amount of opposition. MEA came in with a pretty extensive rewrite or amendment, so turn it back to April to describe the amendments, and then we'll take it from there.
Right, yeah, so as introduced, Senate Bill 719, this is Public Safety State Fuel Security Program, the departmental bill from the Maryland Energy Administration. As introduced, would have established a state fuel security program administered and enforced by the agent or the administration that would have allowed for specified individuals, government units and agencies and private entities to have specified access to supplies of motor gasoline, middle distillate, propane, residual fuel oil, and aviation gasoline during an energy emergency. So essentially authorize them to set up sort of a fuel set aside program. There are amendments being offered by MEA on page 25 of the voting packet. The reprint starts on page 27. And MEA does indicate that they have reached out to all the opponents on this bill and that the opponents are now neutral. The amendments strike language authorizing the administration to establish fuel security percentage levels and issue assignments of fuel security products during an energy emergency, retaining only the language that authorizes the administration to collect energy-related data and maintain up-to-date reports on the supply, demand, and price of various energy resources for planning purposes. Information, this is in the original bill, and in the amended bill, collected under the bill must be held securely by the administration and must maintain the confidentiality of all data that may create a competitive advantage or disadvantage. The amendments also strike criminal penalties and civil enforcement provisions in the bill and substitutes administrative penalties not exceeding $1,000 for a first violation and $5,000 for a second or subsequent violation. So just as kind of a baseline recap, what this would do is allow MEA as part of they are already the designated authority for the state to do the planning around energy resources for states of emergency. This would just give them the authority to request and obtain more information from the fuel suppliers so that they can use it for those planning purposes.
Okay, any discussion? I obviously, all the opponents are neutral now because the bill's substantially less. It's partly a response to Colonial Pipeline, I think in part debacle and trying to get some handled, but it's a different bill clearly than as introduced. Senator Hester?
I was just trying to understand who gets the fine for the violation. Is it the suppliers?
So yes, because it's anybody who is in this case would not be providing the information as requested by the department or by the MEA.
Any additional questions on the bill or on the amendments? Okay, is there a motion? Okay, Senator Hester, is there a second? Second, Senator Kagan, any discussion? Well, actually, that's just on the amendments. Any discussion more on the amendments? Seeing none. All in favor of the amendments from MEA, raise your hand. All opposed? Carries. Motion on the bill as amended. Senator Kagan, move favorable. Senator Hester, I see a second. All in favor, Senate, any further discussion of 719? And again, there was pushback as introduced, not so much now. All in favor, Senate Bill 719, raise your hand. All opposed, 719. And we've got one red on Senator Gallion. So one dissenter. Bill carries. Next up, Senate Bill 733 from Carroll County Senators.
Senate Bill 733, Carroll County Commissioner Districts Alterations. This local emergency bill alters the county commissioner districts in Carroll County as a result of the 2021 and 2022 redistricting plans. There aren't any amendments to the bill, and we do have a local letter and no written opposition was submitted.
Okay, favorable from Senator Kagan. Is there a second? Senator Washington, all in favor of the Carroll County Bill 733, raise your hand. All opposed. Bill carries. Next up, 822, Senator McKay.
Senate Bill 822, Pathways in Technology Early College High P-Tech School Program, High School Diplomas. This bill requires each Pathways in Technology Early College High P-Tech student to receive a high school diploma immediately following the completion of high school graduation requirements by adding to the requirements of Memoranda of Understanding establishing a P-Tech school. The bill must not be construed to alter any funding calculations under Titles 5, 7, or 16 of the Education article. There are no amendments.
I apologize. Are there any amendments?
No amendments.
No amendments. Okay. Was there a motion on the table? Move favorables. Senator Watson's a second. All in favor, Senate Bill 822, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Next up, Senator Brooks, Senate Bill 836.
Senate Bill 836, Maryland Native Plants Program. This bill establishes the Maryland Native Plants Program to be administered by the University of Maryland Extension in coordination with the Maryland Department of Agriculture to, among other things, develop a commercial Maryland native plants list and create a voluntary certification program for growers and retailers, as well as a Maryland Natives marketing program and a Maryland Native Plants webpage. There are amendments in your bill packet. Those amendments appear on page 38 with the reprint starting on page 40, being offered by the bill sponsor, Senator Brooks. The amendments transfer primary responsibility for administering the program from the University of Maryland Extension to the Department of Agriculture, with the Extension administering the educational components of the program. Amendments also authorize the inclusion of cultivars and hybrids of native plants in the native plant list under certain circumstances. And finally, the amendments add a $250,000 mandatory appropriation with $150,000 going to the extension and $100,000 going to the Department of Agriculture for the purposes of administering the program. We'll just note that if the committee chooses to adopt that amendment, we will have to slow this bill down a little bit so that we can get budget and tax sign off, because that takes us over the $250,000 threshold.
Okay, any discussion on the Brooks amendment? Okay, you want to move those Brooks amendments? Okay, is there a second from Senator Augustine? All in favor of the Brooks amendments or amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, amendment carries. Now we've got the bill on the table as amended, Senate Bill 836. Senator Brooks. Senator Brooks, okay. Augustine, all in favor of Senate Bill 836 as amended, raise your hand. Okay, that passes subject to B&T approval. And then finally, Senate Bill 842, Senator Kramer's bill.
Senate Bill 842, Maryland Holocaust Remembrance Day. This bill requires the governor to annually proclaim January 27th as Maryland Holocaust Remembrance Day within the state. There are no amendments.
Sure. Does anybody else want to go on as a co-sponsor? Okay, raise your hand if we're not already on. I think I'm already on there, but
All right, keep
Okay.
them up, please.
yeah,
It's okay.
okay.
Okay,
Got everybody?
got it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, Senator Kagan would like to explain her vote. Oh, well, we didn't vote yet. Yeah, you did vote.
I'm
Explain
speaking
your
on the
vote.
bill. Yeah,
Oh, on the
we're
bill.
debating the bill.
Yeah.
Debating the bill.
Okay.
I generally don't support bills like this, and I would generally be voting against it or hoping that we wouldn't vote on it at all. I think we've got important business, and in general, symbolic measures like this, I feel like are disrespectful to the important policies that we do with budget and healthcare and transportation, economic development, education, and so much more. But I have to say that the witness in opposition spoke to the importance of making sure that that we're spreading the word. And so I'm afraid that his presence here had exactly the opposite effect. And the rise in anti-Semitism and hate and graffiti and violence. I am against the curricular mandate. but symbolism sometimes is important, and for Maryland to show that we stand in remembrance of the murdered millions is important. And so it's not my normal thing, but I am going to be voting for this bill. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the bill before we take a vote? Okay, all in favor of the bill, raise your hand. All opposed, 8-4-2 carries. That completes our voting for today. As for tomorrow, we want to keep this momentum going. And again, if anybody missed those first couple of votes, feel free to weigh in. Okay, so I understand the Baltimore City delegation is meeting at 8, not 9, because originally we were trying to decide if there might be a desire to meet pre-session for voting, but there seems to be a split. Can we have a little discussion here? We have no bill hearings, as I said.